Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Holland's class. And today we're going to be doing UFLI lesson 64, day 2, where we're still finishing up talking about the ED inflectional ending. So let's take a look at our schedule. We're going to go do our new concept review. So we actually did talk about this in the lesson yesterday. So if you haven't seen it, you can go back and check, but we're going to get into it. So what we're going to be talking about is the inflectional ending. So when we have verbs, things that you can do, action verbs, like jump and yell, they tell us what you're doing, but an ending, an inflectional ending can tell you the context for it. So let's take a look at that. So when we have ed, so we added to a word a verb. Let's specify that. We're only using them for verbs to tell that you already did it, past tense. So like I jump means I'm doing it like right now. I jumped is like I already did it. So you add an ed at the end of the word jump. It doesn't change the word jump. It doesn't change what jump means. It just says I jumped before. I yell means I'm yelling right now. But I yelled. I yelled means I yelled earlier. I did it yesterday. I did it before. So that's what we're talking about. So let's move on. This was what we were talking about. What sounds it can say. At the end of a word, it can say d, like I jumped, or actually I jumped would be T, so let me start that over. So ed can say d, like I yelled, d. It doesn't say I yelled, we'll see that in a second. It could say T, like I jumped, or it could say ed at the end of verbs that already end with a D or a T. We'll see that in a second too, so let's take a look. So ed, it could say d, like at the end of called or tamed. Okay, let's take a look at where it says t sound. Okay, so sniffed or helped. You could tell when you're putting ed at the end of words, your brain can usually map out which sound it's supposed to say. But let's take a look at when it does say ed, and this is the schwa. So sometimes it says id or ed sometimes. So like landed, this sounded like an ID. Handed, same thing. Shifted, so that sounded more like an ed. But it's a schwa because this E can kind of change its sound a little bit. So let's move on from that. So these are all the sound patterns for ED at the end of verbs to tell that they're past tense. So let's all read together. Called, kicked, thanked, wanted. Great. Let's go into our word work. Pull out your boards. I'm going to pull up my board. All right, so today we're actually doing something a little bit different. Usually what we do is we have like a word ladder. So I'll give you a word and then we'll change out the sound. But today I'm actually going to read off some words and try to have you spell them on your board. Because when we're talking about the inflectional ending, it's only spelled with an ed. All we have to worry about is spelling the verb and then adding ed to it. So the first word I want you to write is pulled. Pulled. Like I pulled on the rope as hard as I can. So when we say pull, so that's the first part you need to spell. Oh, that's a different spelling pattern. We actually talked about it in another video if you want to check that out. But pulled. Oh, it's a D sound, so I should add a D at the end, right?
No.
No, it needs to have the ED at the end. That's important to know because we only hear D sound, but we have to remember, if it's at the end of the verb, it needs to be ED. Okay? Let me give you another one. Camped. Camped. My friend camped with his family over the weekend. Camped. So, camp, I need to know camp first. Camp. Camped. Wait, so it ends with a T?
No.
No, it ends with ED. It's a past tense for camp. Camp. Camped. Okay, let's do another example. Acted. Acted. He acted very silly today. Acted. So I need act first. Act. 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 acted. Oh, that time I hear the ed. Or acted. Depends on how people say it. Some people might say acted, id with an I. Some people might say acted, but that's why it's a schwa, because depending on how someone says it, it changes its sound. Okay, let me give you 2 more. Let's try the word kicked. Kicked. He kicked the football very high. So I hear k, K takes I and E, so k. Wait, what comes after that? What comes after a short vowel? CK, kicked. Wait, so do I add a T? Do I add a T there? ED. It sounds like T, but it's got the ED there letting us know that we already did kick. Okay, I'm gonna give you one more. And the last one is gonna be busted. Busted. He is so busted. Bust. So to bust means to like break it up. Bust. Busted. Oh, there's the id. Well, why did I say id? Because it already ends with a T. I can't say bust. So the ed doesn't say a T sound there. And it doesn't say busted. Busted. That's why we need the ed there to help break it. Busted. Busted. Okay, good. Go ahead and erase your boards. We are going to move on. This was kind of what we were practicing here. If you want to keep practicing some more, you can. We had words that had the ed that just said the d. We had the ed words that said t. And we had the words that, look, acted. That ends with a T. That ends with a D. That ends with a T. That ends with a T. So it has to say the id part at the end. Cool, let's move on. We're gonna do our irregular words here. And we actually have 4 to review and 2 to learn. So let's start with our review. First one is one. Once. 2. Does. We actually learned those last 2 in our last lesson, so if you didn't check that out, you go ahead. We're not going to practice spelling them. You can either practice spelling the words, or you could write a sentence that has the word in it. But we're going to look at our 2 new ones. So our first one is many. So let's look at this. M-N-E. So this sounds like a short E. This sounds like a long E. That's why we have to know them by heart, because there's going to be lessons that we're going to learn where the Y can make an I or an E sound. But if you don't know that yet, then you're like, wait, if I try to spell many, I'm going to be spelling M-E-N, like M-E-N, and then an E at the end. That doesn't make any sense. So this is a schwa. The A does not make its A sound. It's not manny. It's many, so that's a schwa. And then the Y can sometimes say an I and an E. That's why we need to know it by heart. Now let's take a look at the next one. Any. So this is the same exact thing, but without the M. This says the any. So it's a schwa, and then this makes the E sound. So let's go back to the other one. Many and any. Very good. Let's move into our last section, which is our connected text. So our connected text, I'm going to start with having my girls read the sentence for me. They listed many things to shop for. Okay, boys. They planted kale and then rested. Okay, everybody. He splashed but did not get any kids wet. Awesome. Let's go into our decodable. So our decodable is going to have a lot of examples of words that have ed at the end. So let's keep an eye out for those this time, okay? Will the whale. Once upon a time, there was a whale named Will. Will lived with many whales in a pod. Will loved his pod. The pod splashed and jumped in the waves. The pod drifted from place to place. One time, Will and his pod of whales ended up in a cove. The cove was filled with fish and shrimp. The fish swam in the waves. The shrimp drifted with the tide. Will and his pod of whales flicked their fins to splash the fish. The fish flicked their fins back at the whales. The whales and the fish did not splash any of the shrimp. And the shrimp did not splash any of the whales or the fish. The whales and the fish had fun while the shrimp just drifted. One of the things I also noticed about this story, along with the EDs, there is a lot of three-letter blends in there, like shrimp is in there and splash. So a lot of words that we have to break apart a little bit more if we're going to decode them. But you guys did a pretty good job. So we are at the end. So let's give ourselves a round of applause. Pat on the back, kiss on your brain. We will see you next time. Bye, everyone.